What's in a fist bump? Diplomats and energy investors in full-blown palace intrigue mode after President Biden let his fist do the talking as he greeted Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And you will see it right there. In a first, President Biden became the first U.S. president to fly directly from Israel to Saudi Arabia after the country, once Israel's bitter enemy, made the decision to open its airspace for unlimited use by Israeli airlines. The step considered a feather in Biden's diplomatic cap as the two nations move to thaw their long-frozen relationship. Now, Biden's arrival, though, does mark a 180 turn. Candidate Biden had vowed to make Saudi Arabia a pariah on the world stage after the murder of journalist and Saudi critic Jamal Khashoggi. Some say he was ordered killed by the prince himself, but the U.S. needs more oil amid price spikes, and the Saudis, with their massive proven reserves, hold the key. Did they open the door? James Smith served as U.S. ambassador to Saudi Arabia from 2009 to 2013. Ambassador, welcome. Let's start with the macro picture, if we can. As the president wraps up this trip to Saudi Arabia, from what you can tell, are relations between the two countries better, worse, or the same after this crucial meeting?
Oh, I think they set the stage for it to be better. I have no doubt that privately, President Biden and Mohammed bin Salman established a relationship, and hopefully it's a working relationship. Everything in the region is about relationships. So if they've established a positive one, then there's hope that as we move in the future for the things that really matter, that they can work together.
Much is being made of this fist bump between the president and Mohammed bin Salman. You know, as I looked at it, Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince, he's 36 years old. He didn't seem to be bothered by that at all. It seemed like he had a pretty calm and confident move there. So is it kind of ridiculous to be focusing too much on this?
Yeah, I wouldn't read too much into the meeting. Other people have mentioned that the deputy governor met him at the airport. Again, we don't know King Salman's health. My guess is he could not make that. And I doubt seriously that they would have had Mohammed bin Salman meeting because they'd want their first meeting to be in private to work through differences. And then the fist bump, for his generation, that's what everybody does. It's us older guys that have had to learn.
Yeah, as grown-ups here, although people were saying, oh, it's a handshake avoidance kind of thing because of what President Biden had said in the past about Saudi Arabia. But let me jump to the issue of oil production. The big question has become, did President Biden bring it up? Did he ask the Saudis to increase or ramp up production? And how much capacity might there be left in Saudi Arabia to do that?
I suspect it came up, but probably in an oblique way. It's not the central focus of the meetings, although you could argue that President Biden likely would not be making this trip now were it not for the energy crisis. In reality, the Saudis can only do so much in the near term, somewhere in the order of 500,000 barrels a day. They can invest and bring that up to about 2 million a day in the 6-month to a year period, but they're not likely to make that investment because the crisis will be over with by then. So there's really a limited amount the Saudis can do to impact the price. Other things will drive the price down.
I think that's a great point. He probably would not have made this trip had he, of course, not been faced with a country that is looking at extraordinarily high prices. Although the price of crude oil, we want to just let our viewers know, has come down 15% this month. OK, I want to bring back what just happened in the last 48 hours, 24 hours, is that the president met with the Israeli prime minister. And suddenly we are looking at what could be maybe a tiny step toward the Saudis joining the Trump era, the Trump administration era, Abraham Accords. The fact that the Saudis, and this is a big deal for those of us who grew up in the 70s and watched these two countries, Israel and Saudi Arabia, be bitter enemies, the fact that they are now allowing Israeli airlines, including the national airline El Al, to fly over their airspace, how significant is that?
I think it's hugely significant, and I would argue that the fact that the president started his Middle East trip in Israel is an indication that U.S. interests in the region start and end with the Israelis. And you're right about the Abraham Accords in that it was a good first step, but it's more than getting the Saudis to join the Abraham Accords. It's in Israel and Saudi Arabia's best interests to be fully integrated into the region. For Israel, I would argue their best chance at long-term security is to be fully integrated into the region. Saudi Arabia wants to move from a public sector economy to a private sector economy. They're not likely to be able to do that if the largest private sector economy in the region is on the sideline. So it's in their interest to start moving in this direction. So the overflights, great first step. Next step is an agreement that Saudis can go to Israel and Israelis can come to Saudi Arabia. This is important for Muslims because Al-Aqsa Mosque is the third most important site in Islam. And of course, the travel would generate income. And we start talking from a business perspective, the ability of Israel and the Gulf countries to work together economically has a huge upside into the economic development of the region.
Indeed, indeed. And you're already seeing that with the first countries involved in the Accords, and that's the UAE and Bahrain. So listen, nothing would be better, in my opinion. And business does solve a lot of problems, doesn't it? Ambassador Jim Smith, thank you very much for joining us.